G'day everyone. We're back. We're in Acts chapter 13, and here we change our focus. So you'll notice the lights have changed quite a bit. This is now our Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria table. Obviously, we've had to take it off the wall. Part of that is just because obviously I can't buy that many string lights and battery-operated lights to do this and have a good use for them afterwards. But also, our focus in Acts changes as well. So right at the start, we were very much all around Jerusalem. That's what we were doing. And then as things progressed, that kind of grew and grew and grew. And then there was a persecution and they all spread out. So we got, Judea, Samaria, Jerusalem, all this area that's just represented by these lights. Then we've got a couple of different ones. So here we've got Phoenicia. That's moved. Obviously that had to change. I had to move where that was. But it's still connected. It's close to Jerusalem. Phoenicia and Antioch. They're really, really early. And then we've got Cyprus over here. So this is still Cyprus. Remember, we have been to Cyprus. We will get back there again today. So today we're on to Paul and Barnabas. Now they're in Antioch, right here. And they get commissioned by the church in Antioch to go out and spread the gospel around kind of the world, go on the first missionary journey. And we see that Paul... he heads off and he starts off and he heads into Cyprus. And in Cyprus, if you remember correctly, we've mentioned Cyprus before. We did have coloured lights on, but just to kind of prove the point today, I turned them off. Paul gets to Cyprus and there is kind of a bit of an okay reception, but there's a particular Jewish guy who gets really, really upset at the fact that they're there and causes some strife. And so Paul is brought before... Saul still is brought before a guy called Paulus, and he's the proconsul, and he kind of talks to Paul, and he goes, actually, this guy's onto something. He knows what's going on here. So there's a bit of a spread there, and the Gentiles are the ones who believe on Cyprus. That's where it's all at. And so this proconsul Paulus kind of brings Saul in. So it's Saul and Barnabas, and then here on Cyprus, Saul's name changes to Paul. Now, it's not to do with conversion, so it's not like he was Saul and he's converted to Christianity and becomes Paul. Potentially, it's just because he's hanging out with a whole bunch of Greeks and Romans, and so Paul is a better name. Obviously, the guy's named Paulus, so the proconsul's name. So that might be that, or it might be maybe this proconsul has kind of bankrolled Paul a bit to do his missionary journey. So, he's converted to Christianity and said, actually, I support you completely. I'll give you a stack of money. And so Saul changes his name to Paul to kind of as a mark of respect to this proconsul. That's a potential thing. That may be the case. We're not entirely sure. So from Cyprus, we then head off. And we're going to go, obviously, again, I encourage you to read Acts chapter 13 in its entirety. They're in Cyprus, and then they head off and they rock up to Pisidian Antioch. Now, we've already got Antioch right here, and we see Paul in Pisidian Antioch, and that one is going to be this one. Now, it's a bit like Croydon. We have a Croydon here. It's not too far away. There's also a Croydon in England. I'm sure there's a Croydon in America as well. There's a whole bunch of place names. We're not very original people that have just been copied around the place. So, there'll be a Croydon in England. There's probably there's a Bronia somewhere. There's a Bayswater. There'll be one in England. New South Wales. New South Wales isn't its own name. Someone rocked up and went, we'll call this South Wales, but it's New South Wales. That's where that name comes from. So that's all that's going on here. There's an Antioch, and it's in Pisidia. So it's Pisidian Antioch. And so Paul and Barnabas rock up there, and they kind of spread the gospel, and Paul spends we got a big chunk where Paul is kind of talking with the Jews and the Gentiles, and he's trying to convince them. So there's both Jews and Gentiles here, so you get both. And he's trying to convince them that they need to really change their ways. They need to change what they're doing and become different people. And what he does is he goes through the Old Testament and he proves how Jesus is the Messiah and how Jesus is the one that God has sent for us to follow. That's what he goes to do. And so he has this... kind of huge speech. If you read chapter 13, you see he has this big speech where he talks to them and he tries to convince them that Jesus is the Messiah, to prove them. No, look, if you look at the Old Testament, if you look through the Old Testament, you can see that Jesus is the one we've got to turn to. So that's his plan. Again, who Paul is talking to here, they're probably God-fearing Gentiles. So yes, they're coloured lights, and white lights. So there'd be Jews and God-fearing Gentiles. Gentiles who had heard about God and were kind of interested, but following kind of the Torah and the law of the Jews. And so when they hear about Jesus, there still is a big change for them. But this is what Paul says. So I'm going to read kind of from verse 38 onwards a little bit, just because that's kind of where it kind of gets. So Paul's explained all this stuff, and then he says, "Therefore, my friends, I want you to know that through Jesus, the forgiveness of sins is proclaimed to you. Through him, everyone who believes is set free from every sin, a justification you were not able to obtain under the law of Moses. Take care that what the prophets have said does not happen to you. Look, you scoffers, wonder and perish, for I'm going to do something in your days that you would never believe, even if someone told you." What Paul says is, hey, listen, guys, because you know the scriptures. You know them really well, but I want to tell you that forgiveness from sins is only found in Jesus. It's only in Jesus that we can be forgiven from sins. And what he says is that justification, and that's a solid word, it's a big one, but justification is kind of, we use it a bit funny now, but it's to be proved right. So to be shown to be right or made right or called right. So, if you justify text, if you're going through putting something in a Word document as you're doing homework and you can justify, that's a movement. It makes it right. So you can justify something and you can justify somebody where you kind of show that they are okay, that they are right. You prove them to be so. And that's kind of a really legal term. So it's justice, justification, that kind of thing. So that sense of someone being just and honest and righteous, that's that word. That's the kind of bundle word that it is. And he says, you can't get justification in the Old Testament. Now, we looked at this in Galatians a little bit in our night service, and it's made very clear in Galatians that what Paul is saying, and what he's trying to get at here is when you look at the Old Testament and you look at the Old Testament law, we should be looking at that and going, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. This shows I can't do it. And no matter what I do, like I can try and try and try and try, it's never going to be enough. Because, if I want to get from here to here, well, I can do as much as I possibly can, but I can never actually reach that level. I can never get up there. I'm always going to fall short. Always. Because perfection is the standard. God is perfect, and so perfection is the standard. We're not perfect, and so we just can't make it. And so Paul says, you should read the Old Testament and see that's the case, and we should too, and go, well, we're waiting for the person who's going to deal with this, and that person is Jesus. So for you and I, as we kind of think about standards and as we think about God's standard and how we can be living and how we should be living, I think we can both, you and I can both agree that neither of us are perfect. No one is perfect. There are times where you've done something wrong. There are times where you haven't even met your own standards. The way you want to live your life, you haven't met. There's ways I want to live my life that I haven't met. So if I can't even meet the standards I set for myself, what chance do I have of meeting God's standards, which are perfection? And rightly so, because he's holy and he's perfect. So if I can't do that, I need somebody who can forgive me of my sin and forgive the things that get in the way, the things that show that I don't make that standard. And that's Jesus. So if you are thinking, hey, I'd like to be able to be in relationship with God, I'd like to be proven just, I'd like to be shown to be right and be okay, then what we need to do is trust in Jesus for the forgiveness of sins. Have a good week.